All right, welcome back to your third and final part of our Unit 2 review video lecture guide. And this time around, we're going to focus on the development of trans-regional networks of trade and communication. Remember, trans-regional means across regions. So we're going to see in the first time in world history trade networks that are going to span across multiple regions throughout Afro-Eurasia. And these trade networks also allow for communication to travel and be spread as well. So here we see Afro-Eurasia, and we see the different trade networks that start during time period 2, during the classical era. Now, of course, the most important ones include the Mediterranean trade network, right, dominated by the Romans and the Greeks before them, and the Phoenicians before them. We also have, of course, the Eurasian Silk Roads, right, going from East Asia, right, all the way to, of course, the Mediterranean in the Middle East, and stopping in India here and there. Now, of course, we also see the Indian Ocean Trade Network, right, which is probably the most complex, the most diverse, right? Multiple different sailors from all over the Indian Ocean basin. And one that we haven't really focused on a lot, which is the Trans-Saharan trade network, right? Connecting West Africa over here with North Africa over here, right? North Africa and the Mediterranean. And this one's a relatively minor trade network because, of course, it's going across the Sahara Desert. But we're going to see later on in time period 3 how this is going to become a more important, more vital trade network in the future. All right, so let's begin with the Eurasian Silk Roads. Remember, Eurasia means Europe and Asia, and this trade network goes across Asia and into Europe or the Mediterranean. It begins with the Romans and with the Han Chinese, and it is a luxury trade network. That means that the main things people want are luxury goods, right? The finer things in life, like silk and spices, wine and oil, but also horses, right? The Chinese love horses from Central Asia, and they're going to trade for those horses. Now, the Central Asian people, right, the nomadic pastoral people that live in Central Asia, they're going to facilitate the trade. That means they are going to sometimes work as guides or bodyguards to merchants who are traveling across the Central Asian steppe area, which is not the most hospitable region in the world, right? Very difficult to travel, difficult terrain, and very dangerous. So you need someone to guide you, and that's what the nomadic people of the Central Asian steppe would have, the service that they would have provided. India is involved in this trade networks, as is Persia, and we see the development of caravans, right, where merchants are gonna work together, team up together, group up together, and travel together because there is safety in numbers. Now, the Trans-Saharan Trade Network, again, this is one of the minor, probably the most minor one at this time. It will expand later on, but we're going to see that they're going to be from West Africa. We're going to see gold and slaves making their way into the Mediterranean in exchange for salt, right? And because the people in West Africa, they're going to need salt for survival since they live in the tropic region of Africa, where you sweat a lot, and without the salt, you basically will dehydrate. Now, the Indian Ocean, they're also known as the sea lanes. And again, this is the most diverse one. You have, East Africa, you have Arabia, Persia, India, Southeast Asia, and even China trading, right? They're going to be sailing across the Indian Ocean. Now, none of the merchants, none of these sailors are going to travel from, East Africa all the way to East Asia. They're going to stop midway, making India kind of like the central location of this trade network. And it is going to be also a main place to travel or to trade luxury goods. But here we see more diverse things. We see ivory from Africa, gold and perfume from Arabia, cotton from India, spices from Southeast Asia, and silk from China. And the sailors who are traveling are going to be dependent on the monsoon winds. That means that they have to sail at certain times in the year, and they're going to be kind of forced to stay at their destination for a few months before the winds shift in direction and they're able to sail back home. Now, the main ships that they would travel on were called the dhows, and the dhows were famous because they had these triangular sails called the lateen sails, which allowed them to kind of like maximize the wind energy across the ocean. The Mediterranean sea lanes are, like we mentioned before, they're going to be dominated at first by the Phoenicians, who were these great maritime people from the Middle East, and they're going to have colonies all over North Africa and Spain. And then they're going to be kind of taken over by the Greeks, who are also a great maritime power. And eventually they're going to be dominated by the Romans. Remember, the Romans controlled the entire part of the Mediterranean. And in fact, they nicknamed it Mare Nostrum, right? Meaning our sea, right? Because they controlled all of it. And all these luxury goods from the Middle East or from Africa are going to make its way throughout the Mediterranean and make its way into Europe. Now, we also see that they're going to transport staple crops, meaning food goods, primarily wheat, and we see that the Romans are going to be heavily dependent on food supply from Egypt, and Egypt is a powerhouse when it comes to agricultural surplus, remember, because they have that fertile Nile River Valley. Now, a lot of new technologies are going to take hold during this time period and will allow for trade to expand and increase and transportation to increase. So for example, the yoke, right? The yoke is what we see here is basically like a collar, allows animals to carry heavier weight, like pulling a wagon or a cart. The saddle, of course, is the seat that the rider on a horse would wear, would sit on. The stirrup is the footholds, and the combination of stirrup and saddle will allow people, especially those who were like Central Asian nomadic people, to be able to ride at fast speeds and also be able to fight with their hands, since they were able to maintain control of the horse using their legs primarily. Now, of course, horses are going to be the kind of one of the main animals, but oxen, which you see here, cattle will be another one. And towards the end, we're going to see camels become more increasingly important as they have become domesticated during this time. And we're going to see the people throughout Arabia and North Africa and Central Asia are going to be dependent on the camel because of the dry conditions that they would have to live in. The Americas, they would have the llama, but remember, the llama compared to like a horse or a camel is a relatively small and weaker animal, so it will never be able to carry as much or pull as much weight as the larger pack animals. So here we see the lateen sails I mentioned earlier, those triangular sails, right? The dhow ships, and this technology was necessary to be able to sail across the Indian Ocean. And as people started sailing further and further away, they'll be able to spread and diffuse this technology. And we see that people are going to build ships like this, from Africa to India all the way to China. And along with knowledge of building these type of ships and this maritime technology, we're also going to see the spread of knowledge, like understanding the monsoon wind patterns, understanding how to navigate across the wide open ocean. Now, we are also going to see that crops are going to spread during this time period, and new ways of farming or new ways of irrigation is also going to diffuse or spread. So, for example, cotton originally starts in India, in South Asia, and they're going to eventually spread it through trade and through conquest and contact, is gonna the cultivation of cotton is going to spread into the Middle East, and we're going to see cotton plantations and farms develop there. Rice would be another one. Rice originally is home is in China, in East Asia, but we're going to see rice make its way into South Asia, where it grows wonderfully, and we're going to see this big boom in population growth, not only in China but also in India because of the introduction of rice. We're going to see new irrigation techniques, like the Romans, of course, are going to develop the aqueducts. The Persians are going to have the Qanat system, and wherever the Romans or the Persians went, they're going to take those irrigation techniques with them. Crop rotation and the use of animal fertilizers will be other techniques used to increase the productivity of agricultural land, right? So that more and more people can be fed. Now, along with the transport of goods and ideas and people, we're going to see that across the trade networks, diseases are going to spread, right? And sometimes these diseases are going to have kind of like catastrophic effects on empires and cities. Now, of course, the most important and the biggest disease is called the bubonic plague. And the bubonic plague kind of makes its arrival at first during the Peloponnesian War, when Athens is fighting against Sparta, and Athens is hit with this plague, killing a whole bunch of people before they finally surrender to the Spartans. Rome is going to be hit with a similar plague later on. These plagues, again, they're brought in, or they're spread across trade networks, and once they hit a densely, like a heavily populated urban center, like the capital of Rome or the capital of Chang'an, we're gonna see it's gonna have massive effects. Now, so we see, the spread of disease, and it's going to have negative effects because, if you have a large percentage of your population is dying to the diseases, then it's going to weaken the empires. So Rome and China, Han China, they're going to have a lot of internal problems because of disease. Now, this is way before the biggest disease spread, which was also the bubonic plague, which comes in the 12 and 1300s, which is the Black Death, right? That comes later on in time period 3. But the same disease had affected other cities and other empires, during this time period, during the classical era. Now, religions, of course, are ideas that are going to spread across the trade network, and wherever they spread, they're going to kind of like change a bit, especially when they come to new areas. They're going to have to kind of like alter their beliefs to kind of like blend in with the local beliefs. For example, Buddhism. Now, Buddhism originally didn't have any gods or gods, like the Buddha's wasn't considered a god. He was considered a person who was enlightened. But when it goes into Southeast Asia, or when it goes into Central Asia, where the people are polytheistic, we see the creation of this kind of like polytheistic version of Buddhism, and this like mystical beliefs and like magic and spells and stuff. Found in, kind of like the traditional beliefs of the people of Southeast Asia or the people of the Central Asian steppes. So Buddhism kind of evolves a bit as it spreads to other parts of the world. Kind of same thing with Christianity. Originally, Christianity was a small section or sect of the Jewish faith, and as it spread throughout the Mediterranean, spread into Europe, it will slowly start adopting the local traditions of the of the Europeans, especially like the Greek and the Roman traditions, and combining those with the Christian beliefs. Hinduism is another religion that spreads, but unlike Christianity and unlike Buddhism, which spread because of missionaries and merchants, the Hindus are going to spread and only to one place. They're only going to spread to Southeast Asia. They're not going to spread anywhere else, right? Only to Southeast Asia. However, Christianity is going to spread to a whole bunch of places, and Buddhism is going to spread to a whole bunch of places as well, right? So again, here we see Buddhism spreading from its home place, and where it originally starts in India and South Asia, is going to make its way into Southeast Asia, is going to make its way into Central Asia and into East Asia, right? Christianity is going to make its way into northern Africa, right? It's going to make its way into East Africa, right? This is Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is still today, a lot of people there are Christians, and it's going to, of course, make its way across all of Europe, right? The Europeans who adopt Christianity. All right, so that's it for our third and final video lecture. Thank you for watching and listening with your patience, and I hope this has been helpful to you.